Hello everyone, I'm Vincenzo Menino.
And I'm a psychotherapist based in New York City. And Vincenzo, you want to talk about what you're up to these days?
Yes, I am a psychoanalyst in training with the Gestalt approach. And I have my own men's group, and what I'm really passionate about is to help men get more in touch with themselves and to really find a purpose and get out in life and get what they want more.
And together we have been offering workshops for the last 7 years. We've been together for 7 years. We're married. We live in Long Island. And we met 7 years ago at a mindfulness meetup. Vincenzo was someone who walked in, and I saw him, and I thought, that's exactly...
I was late.
He was late. It was exactly the man that I dreamed of being with, was my first thought when I saw him. But we spent a year in that community not really getting to know each other. I mean, we would talk, but we would talk about stuff, and we would talk about things, and we wouldn't get real with each other. We did that for an entire year.
And you know, we are going to a place where, you know, you talk about feelings, you talk about what is really in the moment.
The meetup was all about that.
Your emotions, getting in touch with your emotions, but we were not getting real with each other for whatever reason.
Yeah, so when we would talk, we would be like, oh, what do you do? How's the weather? You know, what did you think of tonight? We would just keep it on the surface. And then one night, it all changed. One night he came up to me and he said,
why don't you ever look me in the eyes when we're circling?
Right, so it was called Circling at the mindfulness meetup. He said, why don't you ever look me in the eye? And I had a moment there where I could have just brushed it off and minimized it and been like, what are you talking about? I look you in the eye. But instead, I chose to get really honest in that moment. And I said, I have a story that you're a player and that I need to stay away from you. And I don't trust you. And he was very intrigued. He said something that really opened me up in the moment. He said, tell me more. What is that like? Which were two questions that we had learned in the mindfulness meetup to ask to really get someone to open up. So I told him more. I told him how I didn't trust him. I told him how I had these stories and how I'd been avoiding him. And he asked me if he could walk me home that night. So we were in New York City, and we walked into Madison Square Park. And we continued being real with each other using the tools from the mindfulness meetup. And as we continued to be real, we got more and more aware of how we were this incredible match, potentially. And we ended up talking in the park.
We got locked up in the park.
We got locked in the park because we were in there for hours. And we had to climb over the fence to get out. And I did something that night, again, that I had never done before. I told him when we jumped over the fence that I was nervous when we were saying goodbye that he was going to try to kiss me. And that I didn't want him to try to do that because I wasn't ready. And I had never really voiced that to a man before, that it was like too soon to kiss. And he was like, tell me more. And I described it more to him, how I was nervous about this, and we didn't kiss. But I gotta tell you, when we did finally kiss on our first date a week later, it was like fireworks, because we had held off and just talked about the not kissing. And it was that kind of emotional connection that really led to these fireworks. And we've been together ever since. It's been 7 years, and we got married 2 years ago, before the pandemic, fortunately. And we tell you this story because we feel like if we had stayed in our talking about stuff and things and surface, we wouldn't be together today, having this incredible relationship that we get to share, where we practice these principles all the time in our day-to-day relationship, the principles that we're going to share with you today. And what it creates is just this very deep connection where on a daily basis we continue to peel the layers of each other emotionally like an onion. And it's never ending. And that's what we want you to find out from this talk on mindful communication, is that you will never run out of things to talk about. That's one of the things that happens in relationships, long-term relationships. You can start to feel like you run out of things to talk about. But when you're talking about your emotions in the mindful way we're going to teach you, you'll never run out of stuff to talk about.
And I just want to go back to what you were saying about, that we almost missed each other.
Yes.
That for 1 year, we were in the same space, doing the same thing, but really not connecting. And that is what, as you said, it's our motivation. Because how many people are in the same situation and they're missing each other, but they're perfect for each other? Mm-hmm. Because they don't know how to connect.
Right.
So this is, this is why we want to do this.
Yeah.
This is the main reason, is to share with everyone the tools to get to where we are right now, because it's magical.
Yeah, and I always say, if you're not showing your soul, your soulmate will miss you because they won't recognize you as this match. And that's what happened to us. So we don't want people to make that same mistake. And if you're already in a relationship, you can still communicate with each other's hearts and souls. And we give you like a language of the heart with this mindful communication stuff that we're going to explain in a minute. And it just takes you to a much, much deeper place in your relationship. If things are feeling stale, if you're feeling maybe bored, especially with this pandemic, so many people are suffering in their homes, quarantined, in their relationships. There's a lot of conflicts that people are coming to me with as a psychotherapist working with couples. I'm hearing about a lot of issues that people are having related to the pandemic. So we feel like the time is really ripe right now to be offering these tools to you. So we hope they really help in your relationships. So with that said, that is why we are doing this. And what you can expect from this presentation is we're going to get into more talk about preserving a safe space in your relationship, how critical that is to foster honesty in your relationship. And we're going to present to you the top 10 ways that people make mistakes that lead to arguments, that couples, it leads to arguments, it leads to conflict. And we're going to tell you what to avoid, how to avoid that, these 10 tips that are really great. We call them ground rules. So we're going to go over the ground rules, and then we're going to present to you these incredibly powerful, what we call sentence stems. And they're just phrases where you can start a sentence when you're talking to each other that really kind of forces you to keep the focus on yourself and keep the focus on your feelings. Because we talk way too much in our society about our thoughts, our cognitions, our analysis, interpretations, and we overanalyze the relationship and the situation. Instead, we want you to really focus on talking about feelings. That's so key, right?
Yes, and what it does, it kind of prevents the other person, or the possibility for the other person to get defensive.
Yes.
Are we taking a question right now?
We have a great question from Dan Pierce. He says, what would you recommend to someone whose partner is not growing at the same rate as they are and may not be willing to engage in conscious communication? It's a question from the group. That's a great question. So what I would say is, if someone is not growing at the same rate, right? They say you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. So, you can talk about mindfulness, you can talk about better communication, right? But a lot of people, I find most people have to learn how to become better communicators. Like, it doesn't just happen. And, one of the things I would actually recommend is we're offering a workshop on February 12th, an online workshop to teach mindful communication. And I work with several couples who are coming to this workshop because I see one of the members of the couple. And it's very challenging to the person in the couple when only they are learning about mindfulness and better communication. So one of the reasons why we offer workshops for couples is so that the two of you can come and be in a space where you can get on the same page with your communication. And that's why we developed these ground rules, Dan, because the ground rules set the standard for the relationship of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable in the relationship. So we're going to get to those, and even if your partner is not here today, which they're likely not, you can talk about what you learned today. You can talk about ground rules. What are the ground rules in your relationship? And establish that so that you are both on the same page. I hope that answers your question, Dan, but there's more to come that's really going to help with improving communication and getting on the same page. So what else we're going to do? We're going to do the sentence stems later on, talked about that. And we're going to talk about a show we recently saw, Sex, Love, and Goop. I don't know if you've seen it. We finally saw it, and we haven't seen the whole thing, but I want to talk about some things that came up when we watched that TV show with Gwyneth Paltrow. Okay.
Really? You want to talk about everything?
Yes.
I don't know if I'm
We'll see what comes up. We'll see what comes up. So, okay, so let's talk about the importance of the safe space. So we were both trained at a Gestalt Institute, which is all about the here and now, staying in the present moment. And we also attended Harville Hendrix's training with his wife, and they founded Imago therapy. And that is a whole approach where you do a lot of mirroring of each other and really being seen and heard. And what I find with the couples that I've worked with, and we find this with each other, is that we really want more than anything to just be seen and heard in the relationship. And I think a big mistake couples make is they start to focus too much on trying to find solutions when they have conflicts. What is the solution? How are we going to fix this? And they are burdened by that task. So instead, how we look at conflicts is as opportunities to be seen and heard in how we feel. But in order to be seen and heard, you need to establish a safe space in the relationship. They say that safety is the #1 predictor of a successful relationship in studies that have been done. You really need to have a sense of safety to feel like you can open up and be super honest with each other. And what happens is when couples get lost in all these defenses and yucky behaviors that upset each other, they are really chipping away at that feeling of a safe space, and then they start to withdraw and become less and less honest. And when you become less honest, you start to lose yourself. You start to lose connection with yourself and who you are, your desires, your wants, your preferences.
Yeah, what studies show is that when you're not safe, you get into the fight or flight mode, and that's all you can do. You either freeze or you leave the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
or you fight back.
Right. Some people fight back.
It's part of our DNA, our coding.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we react to an unsafe situation.
Right.
And that's where we want to get away from. Yeah. We don't want to have that in our relationship.
Right.
And sometimes people don't know how to create that. Mm-hmm. It's really difficult to be always mindful and not engage into a behavior, into a way of talking that puts the other person on the defensive, that right. doesn't keep that safe space, mm-hmm. that really allows for both people to show up exactly how they are.
Yeah, and when we went to our Harville Hendrix and Helen LaKelly Hunt, his wife, we went to their Imago training. Harville said this amazing thing. He said, talking is the most dangerous thing that we do. And it's so true. They say emotional abuse is, can be worse even than physical abuse. It can do so much harm. So I totally agree that, our defenses and the way that we talk to each other is often so reckless and harmful that it just really deteriorates the relationship and the safety. And that's when things really unravel. So we came up with this mindful communication that really blends Gestalt, Imago, and this method called circling. That's the mindful meetup that we met at. We've combined it all into this, what we're calling mindful communication technique, where it really helps to preserve and build the safe space. So with that said, we developed these ground rules, these top 10 ground rules, to really keep things feeling safe and clean in the relationship so that you can be more honest with each other. So we're going to get into those ground rules now. And the first one, number one, is no escalating. No escalating. And we made this number one because it is a huge way that people go off the rails.
Because I'm Italian, and raising my voice and getting very worked up when something is really, I really feel it, that is important, it's really easy for me. It's easy to get to that place, and I understand now how that impacts the safe space, impact the relationship. Mm-hmm. So that has been really a good thing for me to keep in mind and to really breathe into when there is something that is coming up for me in the moment, right?
I took a deep breath.
Exactly, me too. That's what I do. I take a deep breath, mm-hmm. and if I was not mindful and I was, escalating, mm-hmm. Either I catch myself or Ali will catch it, mm-hmm. and we'll be like, can we slow down? And that is really, it's a word that we use mm-hmm. in this situation that really brings down the energy level mm-hmm. and grounds us. And it's, I find it so beautiful when that she says, can we slow down? she's not pointing the finger like you're doing something wrong, you're not doing it right, but it's just like we are in it together. It's us. It's a relationship. So that's the agreement that we have. That's actually our vows for our wedding.
Our vows,
yeah. That's what we use as well. So that is really something that I've learned and learned how to use.
Yeah. So no escalating, and many of you probably relate to this, but tone is so important. Like what Vincenzo's talking about, being Italian, sometimes he's just like really into what he's saying, but it sounds like yelling. And I'm like, why are you yelling? And he's like, I'm not. And I'm like, I'm experiencing you as yelling. And so he tries to bring it down. And so my point is tone. Tone is so important. You want to watch your tone with each other. And what's also key with no escalating is nipping it in the bud.
Right,
you know how escalating it's like it starts to build up, and then if you nip it in the bud, I'm noticing that things are escalating. Can we pause? Can we bring it down? Can really avoid things spiraling into fights. So you want to really nip it in the bud. So number 2 is to slow down. With mindful communication, you go way slower. So a lot of times we find we'll get into escalation when we're like going out the door on a trip or something, and we start going really fast and talking really fast and rushing. So we'll notice that we're escalating, and we'll be like, can we slow down? Even in your conversations, you want to slow down the tempo, the speed at which you're talking to each other, because when you start to speed up how you're talking, it can feel like escalating. So the more you can slow down and be more mindful, the better. Like, I think of it as like opening the window into the communication and letting the air come in, rather than like a restrictive, fast conversation. So you want to slow down. Number 3 of the 10 ground rules for mindful communication is to be honest. This stuff that we're explaining, it doesn't really work unless you're super honest with each other. Do you want to say more about that?
Yes, and it helps to have that as a ground rule. It helps to have it as something that you both believe in and agree on, because sometimes when we're gonna go into it a little bit later, sometimes you have stories. You think that you know what the other person is thinking in the moment, and part of this what we're teaching is to be curious and investigate, and like, is that true? And that's why the honesty piece is important, because you really need to believe the other person when they tell you, no, I'm not really upset right now. I'm not angry. It's just that I'm thinking of something else that is making me have this expression.
Yeah.
And if there is no honesty, that is a ground rule, then it's difficult for the other person to really take it in and be like, oh, then maybe I was wrong.
Yeah. Part of the honesty, this is really important. Part of the honesty is also trying not to omit stuff. A lot of times we are lying by omission, by not saying things, by not sharing how we feel truly. We minimize, we deny. So you want to practice being super honest, and we're going to show you later on ways to help you be more honest with this feelings chart we're going to share with you later, so that you can be more emotionally honest about your feelings. So that's really key. That's number 3. So number 4 for mindful communication is to avoid sarcasm. So some couples I work with, they're like, oh, sarcasm is funny. It's part of how we relate. But I find sarcasm can often be a way that we avoid intimacy because it's not authentic. It's like saying that you feel a certain way, but you don't really mean it. And it can cause confusion and resentment. And, I understand that sometimes it can be like playful. That's okay. But in a serious conversation about your relationship or about a conflict, you really want to avoid sarcasm because it's not honest. So next is essential. Number 5, no interrupting. You want to talk about that one?
Yeah. The non-interrupting is important because it shows the other person that we're listening.
Mm-hmm.
It shows the other person that your partner has the attention on you and is really listening and is not just waiting to answer, but fully taking in what you're saying. And actually the best thing is not just not interrupt, but when the other person pause, to just give a little bit of time before coming in. And maybe you want to reassure the other person, like, are you really done? Mm-hmm. Or is this just a pause? Because sometimes, that's when the slowdown is part of the slowing down.
Right.
If you jump in right away, then there is no slowing down because the other person might be just taking a pause and thinking of what to say next and accessing their feeling, their emotion, because that is
I almost interrupted.
That is something that it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's not easy to be accessing your feelings in every situation. Mm-hmm. It's important to slow down, take your time, so you can do that if the other person is not interrupting you.
Right. Uh-huh.
So it goes hand to hand with the slow down. You cannot slow down if you don't practice also not interrupting.
Uh-huh. Such a good point. So I work with some couples who, like, they get really excited and animated and they jump in on each other. And we've been working on really slowing down, opening that window into the communication so that they're not, like, stampeding each other. And now they are really letting that space in, giving each other more time and space to really show up. And it's amazing what you hear they get to share that would have been lost had the interruption happened.
And it's the only way you can feel seen.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't get interrupted and you are allowed to take pauses to think about what you're going to say next, to slow down. And the only way you can do that is if the other person is not interrupting.
Yeah.
And you bring it, the energy level a little bit lower and a little bit more into your own energy and your own feelings in the moment.
You're really sexy when you say that. That's one thing I want to point out about this style of communication, this mindful communication. It's sexy. If you can slow down and be more connected to your partner and have eye contact and hold space for your partner in the ways that we're describing, it can improve your sex life because you're more emotionally connected. And
it does improve your sex life.
It does. And for a lot of people, they need that feeling of being emotionally connected in order to feel like having sex, in order to be physically connected. So these ground rules really help with your sex life too, because, just slowing down tends to be sexier. It's more present.
It builds intimacy.
It builds intimacy.
And that's the key to getting more into the sex
into the sex. That's funny. Yeah, it's just, it can make each other feel more attractive.
And open to each other.
Right? So that's number 5, no interrupting, of the 10 ground rules for mindful communication. So next one this is my favorite, because it's like a radically different way of communicating that is so powerful. The number 6 is no change or fix. Do not try to change or fix your partner's feelings ever. And this is something we practice every day. And what it looks like is if I come home and I've had a bad day or something, and I say to Vincenzo, I had a really bad day. If he tries to change or fix by being like, oh, don't worry, tomorrow's a new day, feel better, I lose an opportunity to connect with myself and really get in touch with why I had this bad day and what about it was painful for me. And we lose an opportunity to connect. Instead, if he focuses on me and leans into that I had a bad day and gets curious and explores it with me by asking, what was it like having that bad day? Can you tell me more? How do you feel now? He is assisting me to really unpack my experience of the bad day. And what we find is when we do that, we get so much closer. We get closer and closer and closer with every time that happens. Do you want to say more about that?
I wanted to give an example.
Yes.
Yeah, that was.
Go for it.
We were still dating, and I invited her for dinner. So, Italian prepared a good, nice meal, waiting for her, and she shows up. She comes in, and she tells me, I feel alone. And
I felt alone.
She was not really in a good space. Mm-hmm. And the first reaction I had, like, this is ruining my own plan. I had all these ideas of having a nice conversation, enjoying the foods, and that was pretty much going out of the window the moment I heard I feel alone. But thanks to this work that we were doing, I was able not to stay with that, to let it go, and to just lean in and be like, it's not my responsibility. She's just having the emotion that she's having. And I was able to lean in and ask, what's that like? Uh-huh. Tell me more. I would love to be with you into your loneliness, into your feeling alone. And how does that look like? And that's how we started the evening. And it was magical. It just changed everything. We got so connected, and by not trying to change, she moved away from it. She shared it. She felt heard,
right.
And we had an incredible night, even better than what I was planning for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's so powerful to be encouraged to share more about how you feel and describe it in detail is really...
I'm getting distracted by questions.
Oh, yeah. Let's answer that. So what would you say to someone who is not in a relationship and wants to find one that is healthy, but feels this type of relationship may be out of their reach or ability? How do you attract a conscious communicator? That is an amazing question that I get a lot from individual clients who want to find a mindful relationship. And I have a lot to say on this topic. Do you have something to say?
Yes. What I would say is to work on your own interest, on what it is that is, and that's what happened. That is my personal experience of I was getting through divorce. I didn't have friends. I wanted to, start all over, and I started to go to places where I felt comfortable, where there were things that I like to do, like mindful communication and authentic relating, and that's where it's more likely to find a person that has your similar, interest. And now it's easier to connect because you have something to talk about, and it's easier to see if that person is a match or not.
That's great. And I'll tell you how I did it, because I was the person who was not in a relationship and wanted to find one that was healthy, but I felt like this type of relationship was out of reach, and I wasn't sure how to attract a mindful man. I knew I wanted to find someone who was mindful and maybe practiced meditation or was into healthy living. So one way that I started to do that was someone recommended creating a vision board where I Googled different images and dragged them into a PowerPoint and created this big PowerPoint page of all the things that I dreamed of, that I wanted. And one of those images was a couple facing each other with their hair standing on end, but they were having eye contact. And that, to me, captured the kind of relationship I wanted, like this mindful relationship. And I kept that vision board out where I would often see it, and literally I manifested everything on that page eventually. Some of it took years, but it did manifest. So I don't know if you believe in manifestation, but that is something that people do to manifest the relationship that they want, creating a vision board. The other thing was just getting involved in this mindful meetup. If you go to meetup.com, there are different events, mindfulness events, conscious communication, things like that. That's how you found the meetup. So getting involved in those kinds of things where a person like the one you want to attract would be hanging out at. I am not so keen on like the apps and stuff. I know it works for some people, but for me, I signed off of the apps when I was single, and I decided I was going to turn over my future relationship to the universe. And I have to say, once I did that, we got together within weeks. When I decided to sit back more in my feminine energy and be ready to receive, rather than being out there seeking and grasping for the thing I wanted on the apps, it came to me. So I had to get in this mindset of releasing it to the universe. Personally, that's what works for me. And then the other thing I want to mention is I read the book Calling in the One. And if you go on Amazon, it's incredible. People review this book and say how it worked for them. But you read it, Calling in the One, it's about finding the one love, but it ends up being about finding yourself, really connecting with yourself. And it has journal prompts and things like that to ready yourself for receiving this big love in your life. So I highly recommend that book if you're wanting to find a conscious communicator.
I was thinking of showing a piece of your vision board, the one that I gave to you.
Yeah.
Are you up for it or not? How do you feel?
Yeah, go ahead. You want to grab it? It's right there.
Yeah.
So we will show you. We'll show you the image from the vision board because I shared it with Vincenzo early in our relationship. And I was embarrassed after I showed it to him. I imagined that he was like, that's weird. But instead, months later, it was Christmas. And he gave me this gift where he had taken the vision from the vision board and carved it into this heart. And I just want to show you the image. That is the mindful couple from my vision board. And I liked that it had this higher power entity in the middle, this mysterious thing in the middle with a flame, that like fire that they're holding. Like, to me, it was like they were very passionate, and they made each other's hair stand on end. And this is literally how our relationship feels. Still. And we've made it to the 7-year itch.
And the pandemic.
And it's not itchy, right? It's not itchy yet. And the pandemic. And it says on the back, oh, you can't read it because it's backwards, but what does it say in Italian?
I don't ricordo. Questo viaggio avrà un finale straordinario se viaggi con me. And it translates, this trip will have an extraordinary ending if you are traveling with me.
Oh, so romantic. So, you know, you never know how focusing on something that you want can really manifest the thing into happening. I'm a real believer in that. We have another
I want to
question.
Answer the question from Leila. Go ahead. What are good questions to ask when initially getting to know someone to feel more connected? Recognize if there is a deeper connection. We're actually going to get into that later with questions and prompts to start the conversation in a more mindful way.
Yeah, great question. So we will get to that.
Stay with us.
Yep. Okay, so where are we now? For those of you who are just tuning in, we're going over the top 10 ground rules for having more mindful communication in your relationship. So we're at number 7. Number 7 is to stay curious about each other. I like to say, don't get mad, get curious. Because a lot of times when we're mad, we're making assumptions that the person intended something or meant something that they often didn't. So if you can bring that mindful pause before getting mad and instead ask, what do you mean by that? That question, what do you mean by that? So that they have the chance to clarify what they meant. It will, I would venture to say half the time it'll clear up what you thought you were mad about. Yeah. Do you agree?
Totally. Like in my experience, there's been so many instances where I was ready to jump in and be like, what are you talking about? Like, kind of like on a defensive. And instead of doing that, I chose to ask, what do you mean by that? And when the answer came, was completely different from what I was thinking about and what I was getting all stressed out about. And it just washed away all this energy that was coming up for me. So that, to me, staying curious is a really lifesaver in the relationship.
Yeah. So again, it's asking that question, what do you mean by that? And you can't ask this question too much. We constantly ask each other, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? Because we often have different meanings for different words. So the clarification really helps with the communication being more mindful. So next, number 8 is no blaming and no shaming. No blaming and no shaming. So this is really toxic in relationships. This contempt. The way you can avoid blaming is instead, in your language, keep the focus on yourself. So rather than saying, you did this or you did that and pointing the finger, instead you say, when you did such and such, I felt, and then an emotion. I felt angry. I felt sad. I felt frustrated. So you want to keep the focus on your feeling because it's way harder to argue with the feeling than if you make some sort of statement of blame of your partner. Do you have anything you want to add about that or shaming?
No, I think we could.
Okay, let's move on.
Move on.
So number 9, we're getting there. Yeah. Number 9 is no labeling and no name calling. Do you want to talk about that one?
Yes, it's important to clear that out and not call names. You're lazy. Other things that you might say. It's again part of getting into the habit of creating a safe space, of not getting the other person on the defensive. When we blame or shame, the other person is not a good environment for vulnerability, for intimacy, and it's pretty much a killer of vulnerability and intimacy, and that's why it's a no. There's no blaming, but no labeling or name calling.
Right. So basically, you want to eliminate anything negative that you say to describe your partner. So it can be really subtle too. Like you don't want to say something like, "Oh, you're being childish," for example, or that is selfish.
Right.
You don't want to say that because your partner's going to get super defensive. So you're going to instead say, when you said that, I feel frustrated. I feel alone. I feel sad.
I don't feel seen.
I don't feel seen. Okay? So number 10 of the ground rules for mindful communication is to focus on your feelings. We mentioned this earlier, but we can't emphasize it enough that the key to mindful communication is being mindful about your feelings. And we're going to offer you an amazing tool to focus more on your feelings. And that is a feelings chart, which...
well, it looks like this.
Yeah.
We usually have a PowerPoint presentation that we share.
Yeah.
We couldn't figure out how to do on the Facebook
Live. Right. But you can see here, there are a ton of feelings on this chart.
And you can find it online. You just Google feeling chart, and you can get something that looks like that. And it's really a good place to start. And also to get more into getting more descriptive of what's going on for you in the moment. Because sometimes we don't have the vocabulary to say what it is that we're feeling right now in the moment. And looking at the chart, it starts outside, inside with the angry. But how can you describe angry? There are so many other ways of saying, I feel aggressive, frustrated, distant, and then even more, you can get to the other part where, I feel annoyed, withdrawn, numb, skeptical. So it really starts to give you more vocabulary and get the conversation a little bit more interesting also for your partner, that he gets to understand better. Because that's what you want. You want to be seen and heard in what is that you're feeling in the moment. And if you don't know how to express it, it becomes a little bit difficult to do. So by having this chart handy, you can really get descriptive. And even for yourself, you start to know yourself better. You start to, that feeling of angry, it feels more like mad. I feel aggressive. And you start to really get to understand what is that you're feeling right now, and to communicate it to your partner in a more descriptive way.
Yeah, so you really want to have that vocabulary to use to be more specific, essentially, about what you're feeling. So that is focus on your feelings. How are we doing on time?
It's 9:50.
It's 9:50. We have 10 more minutes, and we're welcoming any questions that you have.
I feel like we need to go to the question that Layla asked,
Yeah.
this is the moment to, start
Yeah.
talking about those phrases and questions that you can ask.
Right. So again, the question was, just going back to her question, what are good questions to ask when initially getting to know someone to feel more connected and recognize if there is a deeper connection? So we want to get into those questions now. There are these, what we call sentence stems, or ways of starting your conversations that really helps you stay more mindful and more connected to yourself. And the first one is, I'm noticing. And you can notice 3 different things. You can notice an emotion, you can notice a body sensation, or you can notice something about your partner. But when you notice something about your partner, it needs to be inarguable. It needs to be something like, I notice that you're wearing glasses, or I notice tears are coming down your face. But you don't say, I notice you're sad, or I notice your intelligence, because those are interpretations of the things that you're seeing about your partner, and we want to avoid interpretation. We'll get to that in a second about what to do when you have an interpretation. But for now, it's I'm noticing an emotion. I'm noticing I feel scared. I'm noticing I feel excited. I'm noticing I feel happy. Or a body sensation. I'm noticing that my heart is pounding. I notice, my mouth is dry. You can bring all that in to what you're noticing. And then, again, noticing something about your partner that is inarguable.
The other questions, what you were saying before, when you are interpreting what is happening for the other person, is, I have a story. And that is really important. That, to me, changed everything in really getting to express myself in a safer way to my partner. Because most of the time, I think I know what Ali is thinking or feeling, and I could come in and say, you are feeling this, you're feeling that, but that doesn't create intimacy. That doesn't create a safe space. It actually creates, it has the potential of getting the other person defensive. And we want to stay away from that. So a way that I can still share what I'm thinking, but in a more loving way, is, I have a story. So instead of saying, oh, you are mad, I can say, I'm looking at your face and it feels a little bit serious, and I have a story that you are mad. And what you always follow up with is that true? And that the curiosity that we were talking about comes in, and the honesty that we were talking about comes in, because you need to be curious and you need to trust that the other person is going to be honest and is going to tell you exactly what's going on in the moment. Because you can then say, oh, I guess you're just thinking about what happened at work right now. You're not really mad at me, so I can relax.
Right, exactly.
So that's like an example of how you can use these questions and really switch the conversation into a more mindful one.
And I want to mention more of the questions. So more of the questions you can ask someone to create a more mindful connection, like Layla was asking. I want to make sure we're addressing that. So asking the question, what do you mean by that? Like we said before, is great for seeing how the person can be drawn out and express themselves, and you get to know them so much better by those clarifying questions. And also, when they talk, asking, what's that like? Like, let's say someone is talking about their childhood, something they experienced in their childhood. When there's a pause, you can ask, what was that like for you? Or you can ask, can you tell me more about that? Or you can ask, how did that feel for you? And this opens up the dialogue about feelings, about, the person's, what we call soul or heart, more than just the brain engaging in the conversation.
Yeah, and one question that to me is, every time you don't know what to say, you can actually ask that.
Yeah.
Is how it is like to tell me that.
Yes.
Like,
I
how
love
do
that
you
question.
feel right now in sharing that to me?
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like, that is a question that just gets deeper from just having a conversation into more deeper feelings in the moment. Like, how it is like right now for you to share that with me.
Yeah. So let's say you're on a date or something. You could be like, how was it to share that with me? And see what the person says. It's amazing what you'll hear when you ask that question.
And you can really dig into the emotional awareness that people have. Some people are like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Some others are some others can be a little bit more ready and used to that kind of introspection.
Yes.
And share from a deeper feeling.
Yeah. So we need to start wrapping up. We have just 4 more minutes, and we want to tell you about the workshops that we offer. If you like what you've heard today and you're interested in learning more about how to have more mindful communication in your relationship,
new exercises,
you can come check out our workshops. And you can find out about our next one is on February 12th, right before Valentine's Day. It's a Saturday from 11 to 3. It's all virtual, and you don't have to participate in the interactive exercises if you don't want to. You don't have to say anything in front of the group if you don't want to. You can just watch, or you can, because we're going to ask for some volunteers to do demonstrations. And it's really incredible what you hear some couples, say that's so vulnerable, like vulnerable pieces of their relationship that they're willing to share with us. So that's a really incredible part of the workshops that we do. And it's coming up. So you can learn more about it at AlisonBulman.com/Heart2Heart Workshop. And that's heart with the number 2 heart workshop.
Yeah, and then what I want to add is don't feel pressure to come and that you have to share.
Yes.
And also because what I have noticed for myself, sometimes or most of the time, I learn by seeing how other people are vulnerable. Like it has so much value to see how it's done, and it's something that you can really get inspired to do by just looking at someone else doing it and be like, oh, if that person did it, maybe I can do it too. Like it becomes more something that you that seems doable for you when you see a perfectly stranger in front of everyone saying how they're feeling, vulnerably how they're feeling.
Yeah.
And then it becomes more something that you're like, oh, if that person did it in front of everyone, I can do it with my wife or with my partner. It seems doable.
Yeah.
It becomes more in the realm of the possibility.
Yes.
When you see it in person or virtually done in front of you.
Yeah.
So I encourage, even if you don't feel that you want to share, that you feel a little bit shy, I still will encourage you to come, because personally that has done so much for me, to just see other people get vulnerable.
Yeah.
And just modeling how you can do it. And you look at these people, it's like, what do they have different from me? They are just human as me. They have 2 hands, 2 feet, like they can do these things. Maybe I can do it too. So it's very inspirational, what I'm trying to say, to see other people to get vulnerable.
Yeah.
So even if you don't want to do it, just come to watch it. It's incredible what happens for you.
Yeah, it's going to be really amazing. And also, I work with couples individually, but we also offer a really unique thing where the two of us work with some couples. And it's kind of like a mini workshop where we work 2-on-2, and Vincenzo brings the male perspective. Oftentimes the male can feel underrepresented in therapy with a female. So sometimes, the two of us, bring both our knowledge into the equation working with couples. So if you're interested in that, feel free to send us a message. But I put in the comments where you can find the Heart2Heart Workshop, AlisonBulman.com/Heart2Heart Workshop. And you can click that link and it'll take you to our next workshop.
Hope to see you there.
Thank you so much. Happy Valentine's Day to everyone coming up. And stay mindful with your communication. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good one. Ciao.